Today, we're going to talk about something huge. A legal case that, and I'm not exaggerating here, literally saved a democracy. It all came down to one single question, a question that gets right to the heart of what a nation is.
So let's just jump right in with the big one. Imagine this. Can a government, one that you elected, just decide to vote away your freedom forever? Can they use the power you gave them to completely tear down the whole system? It sounds crazy, right?
And believe me, this wasn't some philosophy class debate. This was real. On one side, you had the government basically saying, hey, we can change anything. We can get rid of fundamental rights. We could even turn this into a one-party state if we wanted. And on the other side, you had citizens saying, no way. The whole point of the Constitution was to stop exactly this from ever happening. I mean, the stakes were just unbelievably high.
So how did we even get to this point? Well, this whole thing didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was a conflict that had been brewing for a long time.
Really? What this all boiled down to was a huge power struggle. For more than 20 years, you had Parliament and the Supreme Court in this constant face-off. Parliament would pass these big amendments to the Constitution, and then everyone would turn to the court, kind of holding their breath, to see if they'd say, yeah, you can do that, or nope, not so fast.
And this back and forth, this constitutional tug of war, well, it created some serious legal drama.
It's actually pretty wild when you look at the timeline. It's like watching a pendulum swing back and forth. First, in 1951, the court says, yep, Parliament, you can amend fundamental rights. Go for it. They stick with that in 65, but you can kind of feel the hesitation, right? Some judges are starting to get nervous. And then, boom, 1967, the court does a complete U-turn in a case called Golok Nath. They say, actually scratch that. Parliament, you cannot touch fundamental rights at all. You can just feel a huge showdown is coming.
And you could see this anxiety building. Even back in 65, one judge, Justice Mudholker, asked this incredibly insightful question that pretty much predicted the entire future of this debate. He basically said, hold on a second. If we change something really fundamental about the Constitution, is that still just an amendment, or are we in effect rewriting the whole thing? And do we even have the power to do that? That question just hangs in the air.
So, you've got Parliament and the Supreme Court in a total stalemate. And the case that finally breaks the deadlock? Well, it comes from someone you would never, ever expect.
And here he is, our unlikely hero, Kesavananda Bharati. He's the head of a Hindu monastery. And his fight, it didn't start as some grand crusade to save democracy. It started with something much more down to earth. The government passed new land reform laws, and those laws were taking away his monastery's property. He just said, hey, you can't do that. That violates my fundamental rights.
But what started as one man's fight over property, it just snowballed. It blew up into the ultimate challenge to Parliament's power. It got so big, so important, that the Supreme Court had to assemble its largest bench in history. We're talking 13 judges, all brought together to finally, once and for all, settle this question.
And after all that, after decades of fighting, after assembling the biggest court in history, the whole thing came down to the meaning of one single word.
That word? Amendment. See, the government's argument was super simple. Amend means change. We can change whatever we want. But the court, they said not so fast. They argued that words aren't just static things you look up in a dictionary. The meaning of a word like amend depends entirely on where you find it. And in a document like the Constitution, you have to look at the whole picture.
And that's how they got to this absolutely crucial idea. The power to amend something means you can improve it, you can change it, but you can't destroy it. You can't change it so much that you wipe out its very identity. In short, the power to amend is not the power to destroy.
Okay, so if you can't destroy the Constitution's core identity, what is that identity? Well, the court found the answer right at the very beginning. In the preamble, they said, look, this opening statement, it's not just fancy words. This is the whole point. This is the promise the nation made to itself.
And those promises of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity, the court said those aren't just suggestions. They're the soul of the document. They are the guiding stars that give meaning to everything else in the Constitution. This is the foundation. This is the bedrock.
So, starting with the meaning of just one word and following it all the way to the heart of the preamble, the court came up with something truly revolutionary, a legal idea that would change everything. And here's the verdict. It was genius.
A brilliant compromise. The court didn't just say Parliament wins or the court wins. They said, okay, Parliament, you do have the power to amend the Constitution. You need that to keep up with the times. But there's a line you can never cross. You cannot touch its basic structure.
Let's try a simple analogy to make this super clear. Think of the Constitution as a house. Parliament is the owner. You can renovate the kitchen. You can paint the walls. You can even add a new room. You can change and improve the house. But what you can't do is take a wrecking ball to the foundation. That basic structure is the foundation. It's the one thing you can't touch. So what exactly is this foundation? Well, over the years, the court has pointed to a few key things. Stuff like the Constitution being the supreme law of the land, the fact that the government is democratic and Republican, its secular nature, the separation of powers between the branches of government, and of course, the dignity of every single individual. These, they said, are the absolute non-negotiables.
So what's the big takeaway here? The basic structure doctrine is basically the Constitution's ultimate insurance policy. It's like a force field that protects the core principles of democracy. It makes sure that no matter who's in charge, they can't just vote freedom out of existence.
And this leads to one last really interesting point. The court never gave us a complete final list of what's in the basic structure. They left it open. It's meant to evolve. So that kind of leaves the question to us, doesn't it? What parts of a democracy do you think are so important, so fundamental, that they should be protected forever, no matter what?